Welcome to another edition of the It's Cavalier podcast. As always, it's your boy Mac. Joining me today is my friend, my co-host, you know him well, Corey Walsh of Fear the Sword. Corey, I feel like it's been millions of years since the two of us have gotten on this pod to ramble on about the Cavs. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. The last time we spoke was right after the Donovan Mitchell trade, and I feel like we both have time to digest. So, we'll give much more rational opinions right now, like how Jetty should start at the 3.
You just won't let it go, man. You won't let it go.
Oh, no, I let it go. I let it go entirely.
Oh, for sure. We've had time to digest just about everything about this trade. We got to see Donovan Mitchell's introductory press conference. That was pretty dope. Pretty awesome. And I did a reaction to that. I don't know if you saw that. I know you've been busy.
A full 51-minute pod solo, just like the Colin Cowards of the world.
I was not sure if the Cavs would rip that down, because technically I think that is probably not good, because I did technically stream it. And then it uploaded it after. So I don't know. They might come after me for that.
But then they saw your thumbnail of you looking like you're pondering some deep life questions on the YouTube page, which if you haven't seen it, check it out. And they were like, you know what?
Actually made fun of me for that one.
I was just like, damn, Mac's just becoming a traditional YouTuber now with the thumbnails.
I had to do something.
You should have had a clickbait type header being like, just like Donovan Mitchell throws chair at Cavs press conference.
Like Varden.
Yeah. Shout out to Joe Varden for coming up with instant trigger posts that just get Cavs fans good vibes thrown out the window.
Yeah, like that was, I guess, the question, was something that we should have all anticipated. And he wasn't wrong in asking the question. I just think the headline itself rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. And the article, I got what it was trying to say, but it's just those pesky headlines, like the clickbait type of stuff,
I mean, I feel like it with Donovan Mitchell, I just hope Donovan Mitchell doesn't really come into this. Well, like, obviously, whatever he says at the press conference is like what him and his PR team have probably like been preaching out, being like, all right, send this message when you get it. A part of me just really hopes Donovan Mitchell doesn't come into this situation with the Cavs thinking that it's like his team and his identity, because it's obviously Darius's. And Darius is like the embodiment of the team. And I could feel like if the Cavs team, like season, not this season, like next season went like kind of south, I could see it being like, well, whose team is it really? Articles starting to pop up. So, it's just a question that I feel like needs to be asked at some point.
I think it will be. And I think that whole methodology is going to be tested this season. I think we're going to see a lot of that kind of adjustment between the two, mainly Donovan, because we know that Darius has played with another ball dominant guard in Colin Sexton, and the two have shared the court for extended periods of time. Donovan, he's played with some pretty high caliber guards in the past, but I think it's pretty safe to say nobody quite like Darius Garland, and nobody as ball dominant as Darius Garland. So he will have to adjust to either being the number 2 option, or a 1A to 1B type scenario between those two.
Yeah, I mean, if it was easy enough to like have your roster be as successful as it looks on paper, a lot of these quote unquote super teams would become more formidable than they have in the past. I mean, when you looked on paper, we'll say, like as an example, a few years ago when the Oklahoma City Thunder acquired Paul George and Carmelo Anthony with Russell Westbrook, everyone was kind of penciling him in as one of the top teams in the West, and that team got knocked out, ironically enough, by Donovan Mitchell in the first round. So, I mean, things don't necessarily pan out the way that everyone expects, and that's what makes like the NBA such a cool sport to follow. Nothing's exactly as predictable as most people tend to believe it is. So, like, as excited I am for this Cavs team, I'm not expecting us to seamlessly walk into the season and walk away being like a top 3 seed in the East, as I see some experts predicting us to be.
As you say, on paper, this is a very, very talented team. But we've seen that in the past, with Cleveland teams. We've seen that league wide. I mean, look at Brooklyn right now. They got a lot of shit to figure out themselves. But Cleveland, you think back to the LeBron James teams, especially that first season he came back to town. Slow starts. When you put talent together, or when you're trying to mesh together big time egos or anything. And I think Donovan Mitchell, although he said all the right things and he's continuously said all the right things throughout his career, make no mistake, I think that guy does have an ego, and I think that's justifiable. I think Darius Garland is starting to develop one, and again, justifiably so. But how is that going to mesh with the other talents on the roster? But my friend, we came here today to discuss some positions, right? So let's go ahead and dig right in here. So we know this is how we're going to break this up: guards, forwards, big men. I think that's the most apt way to do it because the NBA is continuously moving away from positions as a whole, and we're seeing this whole positionless basketball thing completely take over the NBA for the most point. Geez, I can't even get it right tonight.
No problem.
Guards, forwards, bigs. So let's start with Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell. We know these guys are going to start. There's no questions there. I mean,
what?
If there was, it would be breaking news. So let's start with DG, man. A guy who's coming off a career year, 21.7 points per game, 8.6 assists, which for those of you who are maybe a little bit younger, that's the most assists by a non-LeBron James player since Andre Miller back during the 2001-2002 season. And that was the season in which he finished with 10.9 a game. That's a big deal because, we're so accustomed, or we grew so accustomed to seeing LeBron continuously hold the ball in his hands and make all the plays. Darius Garland, man, he's the next big thing here in Cleveland. Not counting Evan Mobley, obviously, but Darius Garland, we know he's cemented at that one guard spot. He played nearly 36 minutes a game last season, and I don't see that changing this year. Is there anybody who could actually challenge Darius Garland for being like the leader on this team? Is it a Donovan Mitchell?
No, I think it would be pretty shocking to me if Donovan Mitchell walked in and automatically became like the leader of this Cavs team. Like maybe in terms of like playoff accolades, he's probably like the leader because he's been through like the most challenges of anyone outside of Jared Allen and Kevin Love. Obviously, Kevin Love's been the most battle tested, but Kevin Love isn't going to be in the starting lineup and leading the Cavs on the floor. So Donovan would have I think the thing about the Cavs that's kind of unique as compared to other teams is they're so young that it's not necessarily like you're a leader because you're the best player. You're a leader on the Cavs for Darius's case because he not only is like the focal point of the offense and the initiator, but at the same time, he's definitely the emotional leader as well. He has gives off the dog energy that the team likes to have. He has that underdog mentality. I mean, we're only a few years removed from Darius Garland being ranked as one of the worst one of the worst players in the league statistically
in the NBA, right?
I mean, that kid will definitely carry a chip on his shoulder throughout his entire career based off of that and try to break the mold of what was already predetermined for him after 1 year in the NBA. So I think this is Darius's show. I think in order for the Cavs to truly be successful, it has to stay Darius's show. I don't think the Cavs will benefit from a Donovan Mitchell ball heavy style that like we see in Utah for the most part. I mean, they brought Mike Conley in Utah to try to bring the ball off of Donovan Mitchell. But if you look at the percentages of how often Donovan Mitchell held onto the ball, it was up there with like Russell Westbrook type numbers. So that doesn't illustrate, I think, what the Cavs offense is going to necessarily look like. And if it does, that means they're going to have to stagger their minutes. They can't both be on the floor at the same time if they plan on having Donovan Mitchell be so ball dominant, because that will take away from what makes Darius Garland so special.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly valid here. I think you don't want to mess up with the chemistry that the team built last season, and I think that's a word that a lot of people like to use these days is chemistry. I don't know what the addition of Donovan Mitchell could do to hurt it, but I do know that in terms of the offensive pecking order, it's going to be an adjustment period for both of these guys. And speaking of Mitchell, I mean, we're talking about a guy who attempted about 10 threes a game last season, which would have by far led the Cavs. When you take into account the 3-point production that you lost from Lauri Markkanen, who took 6.2 from beyond the arc last year. You're going to need every bit of those. And I mean, you no longer have Ochai Agbaji coming in to fill a hole. Colin Sexton's out the door, obviously. So you're going to need every bit of what he brings from the table in regards to spacing. 3-time All-Star, we know he's going to see the lion's share of the minutes at the 2. So, those are your 2 pillars right there. And then it gets a little bit murkier after that. I'm going to kind of make an audible here and not include Ricky Rubio yet, just because he's due to miss a good portion of the season. So I'm going to skip right on over him and head to the next guy in line, and that is Charis Levert. Charis Levert is quite divisive among Cavs fans, isn't he? Guy came in and averaged 13.6 points, 3.9 assists, which ain't bad for a 2 guard, and shot 43.5% from the field. But what he really lacked was production from beyond the arc, which is at 31.3% in the 19 regular season games he played with the Cavs. My question for you, my friend, is we know that there was a huge focus on Colin Sexton's contractual situation this season.
What? Are you sure?
Charis Levert will soon find himself in similar territory this year. He has no shortage of questions to answer this season. Can he play off ball? Can he be an initiator off the bench if that's the role that he's given? Biggest one. Can the motherfucker stay healthy? That is the biggest one right there. So my question for you, bud, is if you had to just say right now what Charis' role is going to be, what do you think his day one role is going to end up?
I feel like the ideal Charis Levert role is for him to be the 6th man off the bench. I just can't see a world in which 3 guards are going to be in the starting lineup.
You don't like the 3 guard lineups?
I just don't like the idea that 3 ball dominant guards are going to need to be on the floor at the same time. That's just a recipe for someone's going to get pissed off and play infinitely worse. And I hate to break it to Charis Levert. It's probably going to be Charis Levert, because if I was the coaching staff of the Cavs, and I had to be like, who should we appease more? Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, or Charis Levert? I don't think Charis Levert's name is going to get thrown out once in that conversation amongst the staff. I think Charis Levert will thrive most being off the bench, where he can be like a Jordan Clarkson type, for example, for you, like what Utah was looking for when Donovan Mitchell was off the floor. I think Charis Levert has times where I'm really impressed by his vision. I think there's other times with Charis Levert where I feel like he has tunnel vision and only looks for himself, because that's just the way he became the player who he is in the NBA. I don't blame him for needing to do that, because, at some point, players need to be selfish for themselves in order to get their name out there and become like a recognizable thing. I mean, how many teammates out there are out there being like, you know what? I love playing with Jordan Clarkson. I love playing with a guy who loves to shoot the ball 20 times.
Joe Ingles.
Yeah. Joe Ingles is like, man, I love watching Jordan Clarkson shoot. It's wonderful. I just love standing in the corner. Yeah, no, it's like if the Cavs had those 3 starting line, like as their starting lineup, I could see a situation in which Darius and Donovan are like, wait, is Charis shooting the ball like 15 times? Like, when am I going to get the ball? I want to shoot it 15 times. And then one of them will be like, I also want to shoot the ball 15 times. And that's just going to be an awkward situation. I think Charis needs to be, in order for him to be the most successful, he has to be as far separated from the other 2 guards at the same time as possible.
You make it sound so just horrible.
No. I think he can be
for
successful.
The Ricky Rubio, Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell lineups.
Well, if everyone, like, here's the thing about Charis Levert. Like, for the longest time, you and I were discussing how Charis Levert is like a worse version of Colin Sexton.
I'm not gonna hide from that. We did definitely say that,
and now
I still believe that.
And now I feel like we're both in the same belief that Donovan Mitchell is a much better overall player than Colin Sexton is. So now explain to me why we need to have the massive drop off between Donovan Mitchell and Charis Levert. I feel like we now have a more staggering difference of the same archetype, and I don't need 3 of those types of players on the floor. Not to mention the defensive issues that would cause would just be way too much for this Cavs team. I think there's too many issues by putting Charis Levert at the 3 hypothetically, but obviously I could be proven wrong, and I'm not here saying that I'm a coach in the league, so That was just my 2 cents.
Oh man, no, there's no pushback there. I mean, we're completely in agreement about that. It is like the optimal role for Charis, and this might be the best spot he's ever played in. To be honest with you, that's at least my opinion. That's my takeaway. This might be his most optimal role that he's ever been in, is to be the sixth man for this team. Fun fact for you guys out there: Charis Levert saw 30 or more minutes in 9 of his 19 appearances for the Cavs last season. I do not think that stays the same this year. I think you're probably going to end up keeping Charis around 26 to 28 minutes a game as your sixth man, is your primary guy, at least until Ricky Rubio gets back. And hell, maybe even after that, depending upon how Rubio looks.
I think that will be an interesting thing to see, is how the Ricky Rubio situation filters out, like who's the true sixth man. Because I feel like there's 3 players on this Cavs team that could be that sixth man. It could be Kevin, it could be Charis, or it could be Ricky Rubio. And it just the only way Kevin Love is thrown into the rotation of he's the sixth man is because Kevin Love's on fire. Like we saw many different situations last year where Kevin Love was like ballistic from the 3-point line, and that gave him the minutes he needed. But as you and I both know, JB is not afraid to yank Kevin Love if he is shooting like 0 for 6, and that's it.
It happened in the play-in games at a certain point. I forget which one, but we've definitely seen that. But like even last season, had Ricky Rubio not gone down, Ricky Rubio is probably the runner-up for the sixth man of the year. He might even won sixth man of the year, and we're not even talking about Kevin Love as the runner-up. But that just shows you the importance of Kevin. Still, we don't know what Rubio is going to look like when he gets back, but I want to see the dynamic between Charis and Ricky, what that will look like, who has the ball in their hands. I mean, I'm pretty sure that we're going to want to see Rubio with the ball in his hands more often than not off the bench as that initiator. And that just begs the question: can Charis Levert play effectively off ball, even if it's in the second unit? So there's just a lot of unanswered questions for him that he's going to have to figure it out on the fly really quickly, because this is a contract year for him. And like I said before, we saw Colin, enter a pretty tough negotiating period with the Cavs, and Charis could soon be doing the same if they don't outright, say, well, go get money somewhere else or trade him midseason, which I don't see happening. But that's your third guard right now as of now. And then next up is Neto, which in my opinion was one of the more underrated and perhaps underappreciated acquisitions this offseason. Corey, how many times in previous seasons did we see the Cavs really be hurt by not having a true backup point guard? and we know, like, how Neto is not what you would consider like a star level point guard at all. He's not Ricky Rubio, but he's definitely a better option than Brandon Goodwin or RJ Nembhard.
That's a stiff competition. But the thing with Raul Neto is that he just is a stabilizer. I mean, it was nice to have, like, when Rondo last season was at his peak of play, it felt nice to know that you had a solid option at backup point guard. I mean, the thing about Rondo is that you'd be very happy if he if he made a 3. The thing about Rondo was he was willing to take 3s a little too often for my liking. Raul Neto just feels like a stabilizer on the floor. Like, he kind of feels like a small step below of what Ricky Rubio was going to bring to the table, because Ricky Rubio last season was still a starting level point guard at like the middle tier of point guards in the NBA. But at the same time, like, having that come off your bench is such a valuable asset. Raul Neto is like a slight step below that, where he's not in the Tyus Jones level of backup point guard, where you're stoked that you have the ability to have him as your backup point guard. But Raul Neto is going to really raise the floor for the bench unit, because we see a lot of times last year that the Cavs really struggled when Darius Garland was off the floor. It kind of felt like a miniature version of LeBron from like the mid 2000s.
That's a nice way of putting it.
It's just like when Darius came off the floor, you felt like, all right, I needed to know how this offense is going to operate, because Darius was the, like, if he was the spoon that stirs the drink, when he was off the floor, the drink and the cup just fell over and the water was just pouring everywhere else. Because at times you were just like, what is happening? There was like shots being taken with 2 seconds left on the shot clock, a lot of just ball holding. it was ridiculous. I think Howell Neto is going to be very valuable. I think we'll definitely see his value very immediately. And I think I'm more interested to know when Ricky Rubio comes back, what if Howell Neto will still see some minutes, because while the Cavs are definitely struggling for who is probably going to play the 3 minutes a lot, I think we're very deep at the guard position when Rubio comes back. We have a lot of different choices and a lot of different ways we can throw out lineups. So I'm excited to see what the Cavs staff decides to do from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, literally, that's 5 different guys who could probably all see time. Well, at least we know 2, if not 3 of your players will see time there, and Charis, DG, and Donovan. Neto and Rubio, it's kind of a toss-up by the time Rubio comes back. I'd have to think that based upon what the Cavs saw out of Rubio last season, that they would be probably more willing to play him over Neto if it really came down to it, and Neto is really kind of your insurance policy kind of guy. And I'm okay with that, but that's not to say that Neto couldn't have like a really good start to the season in the Cavs just for the sake of chemistry and lineup consistency, opt to give him or keep him within the rotation. But that takes away from other guys' opportunities who are deserving too. So it'll be definitely interesting to see that. And I think at this point in time, that kind of rounds out what you kind of have out of your like NBA level competition in regards to that. I'm not factoring in a guy like RJ Nembhard because I just fail to see any scenario outside of injuries that he'll actually see meaningful time.
You weren't impressed by his summer league?
Man, there were, me. I was way more impressed with a guy like Lou Travers or.
Well, weren't we all? That's Cleveland's darling.
Yeah.
I'll take Lou Travers at the 3 right now.
I take him on the NBA roster for sure. I don't know at the 3 right now. But let's go ahead and move on to the forwards here. So, and some of these guys are kind of interchangeable and could line up at least the 2. Kind of interchangeable due to their size and us seeing them play the 2 before. So I'm going to start off with Isaac Okoro, who, we know this is a big year for Charis. This is a huge year for Isaac. In the past 2 seasons, we saw 3rd-year leaps from Colin Sexton and then an all-star leap from Darius Garland. Will that be the case for Isaac? It's possible. But we do need to keep in mind.
All right, let's bump the brakes.
Let me just finish. It's possible, but we do have to keep in mind that, his breakout could look a hell of a lot different. We know, man, that Colin and DG are ball dominant guards, to say the least. Okoro is by no means that. And so he'll likely have to further hone his off ball usefulness this upcoming year.
Oh, that's it?
I mean,
that's all he has to hone. How about having a respectable 3-point jumper?
That's what I was going into. He's got to become a viable threat in catch and shoot situations, and he's got to, cut when he's needed, and along with bringing his pesky Brandon defense. So there's a lot that he has to do. But a breakout is not unfathomable. But my question for you is this: as of right now, if you rolled into game 1 with Isaac Okoro as your starter at the 3, are you okay with that? Are you comfortable starting Isaac Okoro at the 3 as of right now?
I have been struggling with this question for multiple weeks, pretty much. I would be fine with Isaac being the 3, but I want Isaac Okoro to be the first person taken off the floor when the buzzer is rung for subs.
So you want him to be this year's Colin Sexton?
I would honestly I've decided I would rather have Dean Wade start at the 3 than have Isaac Okoro, just for the continuity of the big 3. So the big 3 lineup, so that the defensive part stays intact. I think I know and I understand that Isaac Okoro went from a situation in which Mack and I were talking about a month ago, being like, man, Isaac's in a perfect spot now. He's on the bench. He thrived in this role at the beginning of the year when the expectations were not astronomical for him. And now he's like in the conversation with, well, like you see on all these ESPN graphics for starting five, the Isaac's name is just thrown in there
They
off the
pencil
bat.
him in as the de facto 3. I think that's what that is.
Yeah, and I'm just like, I just with the way it's weird with this Cavs lineup because I feel like with Isaac Okoro being in the starting five, defensively it makes sense, but offensively you now have 3 non-shooters pretty much and 2 shooters, and that is not threatening at all for opposing defenses. Like, yes, our guard combination is pretty. It's an elite scoring duo. But no one's going to be quaking in their boots when Isaac Okoro, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen are on the floor, and they're like, oh, man, so they're just only going to attack the rim? Because that's like what the 3 of them pretty much do. I mean, Evan Mobley, you and I have seen the offseason workout videos. He's been expanding his range, but at the same time...
Beautiful, man. It's Kevin Durant-esque.
All right, well, let's just calm down. I expect Isaac to take a jump. I just don't know if that jump is going to translate into him becoming the starting, like that he should be the starting 3. I think Isaac is going to make the transition into being a very good contributor for a winning team. Now, I'm not saying that needs to be offensively, but I would hope that his offensive game takes a step. I'd rather it take a step than stay neutral. I don't need it to take a massive step forward to like a year 3 jump like Colin or Darius because it's completely different types of players. So if Isaac could just become more well-rounded, that makes him the most valuable in my mind that I realistically think he's going to be.
Okay. I think that is fair. I think, like I was saying, the breakout for Isaac could look a lot different if it does happen. And in terms of statistics, it could be just in the form of a modest increase to his scoring, like 3 to 4 more points per game. And I think that's totally viable if he is able to shoot with a higher volume from range. I think that's really the biggest building block for him is becoming a true threat, or at least a respectable threat from range. And then you could really talk about him having that type of breakout or being effective as your starting 3. But he's not the only option in town. Lamar Stevens, a guy who truly embodies the junkyard dog mentality that Cleveland brought to the table often last season. And he too, the only thing really holding him back is the lack of a consistent 3-point shot. That 27.7% from range is not scaring anybody. And that's, we're talking about Isaac, and Isaac shot 35% from range on low volume. Lamar shot with even lower volume. Dude took just 1 3 a game and converted 27.7% of them. So we know he's got the defense. We know he's got the mid-range game. That's never been a question. That dates back all the way to Penn State. But do you think he could actually push Isaac for the 3?
It's weird. The way I go mentally back and forth on who I like more between Okoro and Lamar Stevens is just a never-ending roller coaster for me. I find myself all the time just falling in love with the idea of Lamar Stevens being the 3 of this Cavs team, just because I feel like it's more to benefit Isaac, because I think Isaac would benefit more from being a complementary player than being in the starting 5. I feel like Lamar is one of those players that I would feel comfortable with him coming off the bench or being in the starting 5, because I think he's one of those players that doesn't get shaken by poor offensive production early. I feel like Isaac, if he sees that his shots aren't falling, shuts down. Whereas Lamar, like I think about that Lakers game in particular last season when he was atrocious.
Why are you gonna pick the man's worst game out?
No, but I'm saying like I feel like if Isaac had that same exact game, we would not see like the same aggressiveness that we continue to see from Lamar Stevens. Like Isaac, like for example, had that great game against Philadelphia last season, and we kind of both were like, all right.
And we keep coming back to that to make us feel better.
I know, no, but we're like, we thought that was like the sign that this team, like he was going to take a step forward offensively because everyone was injured. We thought maybe Isaac was going to step into like that secondary scorer role. And as you and I both know, that's not how the story was written. And in the playoffs, teams just we had to pull him because we were basically playing 4-on-5 offensively, and his shots weren't going down, so we weren't punishing them not respecting his shot. So at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, I can't fathom a world in which Jetty Osmond starts because defensively, that would just be the worst case scenario of any of the choices. Isaac's the worst. Isaac and Lamar are both not great choices offensively, and that's why I keep finding myself at the Dean Wade at the 3 because he's like the easy, no risk situation out of all of the choices I feel like we have.
Okay, well let's talk about Dean. What can we say that we haven't already said about Dean on the true and official Dean Wade podcast?
Chase Down, you're on notice. Thanks for having us on, though.
On the official Dean Wade pod. I mean,
the premier Dean Wade pod.
Just kidding, but for real, not enough people really took into account the loss of Dean Wade last season and what that actually meant to the Cavs and how that affected them, especially defensively,
or how it affected us.
Yeah, well, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you can't tell me, Corey, that Dean wouldn't have been impactful in those playing games in some capacity. I think that he definitely would have been a body that you could have thrown out there that would legitimately, at least he would have been impactful defensively on a guy like Kevin Durant, or you're throwing him out there to make life a little bit more difficult against Atlanta. And so the loss of him was big time. Dean, if you're talking about him in terms of starting this season, he does, as you alluded to earlier, at 6'9", he would keep tall ball intact. That mentality to a degree. We know he can space the floor. And he did so with decent enough volume to inspire confidence that he could, continue to keep that rolling. I don't know about providing like the 6+ attempts that Lowry did, but certainly is serviceable from range. Probably the best shooter. Probably not even probably. I'm going to take that word out. He is the best shooter of that bunch if you're factoring in Isaac, Lamar, Jetty. Well, no, not Jetty. Isaac.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Jetty on his best night is the best shooter on the Cavs.
We'll keep that to just Lamar and Isaac, but he's the best shooter out of that trio. He did start 28 games last season, so we've seen him. The question really just, can he, one, stay healthy? Two, can he be consistent? So, and three, does JB have enough confidence to really pull Isaac in favor of Dean? Big question. You already mentioned Jetty, so I guess we'll go ahead and talk about that and go down that rabbit hole real quick. We've already gotten the full Jetty Osmond experience, I feel. We know that when he was in the game last season, or when the Cavs opted to play him, it was because they wanted to space the floor, and to the most part it worked, to the tune of 35.7% on his 3-point attempts, and with good volume too. 5.4 per game in only 22.2 minutes per game. So we know it can work. Just doesn't need to work in a starting lineup.
Defensively, it would be a disaster.
Absolutely.
I think
atrocious.
JB would legitimately have a stroke if Jetty Osmond was in the starting lineup on opening night. That's the only JB would have to be locked away in a different stadium in order for Jetty Osmond to be the starter on opening tip.
The only scenario in which I like Jetty starting is at the 2 on a very injured Cavs team. That's the only time I would be okay with Jetty starting this season, considering the talent that we already have in town. But
Mac, this is very controversial for you because I seem to remember last season, Mac was the guy tooting the Point Jetty range.
Off the bench, though.
You can't have Point Jetty off the bench.
Last season you could, and 2 seasons ago you definitely could when the Cavs didn't have a true point guard. Look,
we played him at starting point guard against like New Orleans, I think, last season.
And he had 12 assists.
Yeah, my point. Mac is like just here being like, oh man, Jetty can't be a starting player, but yet I wanted him being starting point guard.
A spot starter. That's what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. And Jetty, like I said, we've seen the full Jetty experience now, and I think he works best as a reserve shooter off the bench. I mean, we heard all day long last year that, oh man, he played really well with Ricky Rubio. Well, guess what? Ricky Rubio's not playing for almost half the season.
So Jetty's gonna suck for half the year. So get ready. It's gonna be awesome.
So yeah, it's exactly what Corey said.
Yeah. Love you, Jetty. Thanks for listening, because you totally are.
Next up here is a guy who probably doesn't factor in at all, but I'm still going to mention him because I theoretically, and you know what I'm going to say, theoretically, hypothetically, whatever adjective or I don't know what that you want to throw in front of that, Dylan Windler. Dylan Windler is a guy who, after being selected 26th overall back in the 2019 draft, a lot of people had confidence that he could develop into a 3-and-D player. Hasn't happened yet. And most of that is due to confidence issues. So
the ironic part about Dylan Windler is that the part that has shown the most in NBA footage is his defensive effort versus his offensive effort, which when he was drafted, you thought we were going to just get another typical white guy shooter that was just going to ballistically shoot from the 3-point line.
Hashtag white guy shooters.
Hashtag 2K archetype white guy shooter.
Oh man, that just something about that doesn't sound right.
Well, you know, if you want to have a mind like that, Max, sorry, I think PG, unlike some people who like to look at the dark part of the world. Come on,
man. Listen, Dylan Windler is
not a shooter.
He's an enigma because theoretically on paper, you know, coming out of Belmont, it looked like it was going to work. And it's possible, like with very small percentage, it's still possible that after this trade and, you know, roster spots open and potential paths to minutes at some capacity if injury occurs, that Dylan Windler could finally start to show a semblance of an offensive game. But that remains unseen at this point, and his chances are almost dried up at this point. So,
Mac, in your opinion, what is more likely? That Isaac Okoro becomes the all-star that you predict he's going to be, or that Dylan Windler becomes an average NBA player?
First off, I didn't predict no fucking Isaac Okoro all-star breakout. Second of all, if I had to gun to my head, if I had to answer that question,
you do love these shooter type questions.
Yeah, more like gun to my head, Dylan Windler for sure, because it's not a high bar. We're talking about Isaac Okoro taking a leap from role player to all-star. That's a big leap. The gap between fringe NBA player to average NBA player or average, you know, low end role player. I don't know what kind of fucking term you want to throw in front of that, but it's obviously Dean. It's obviously Dylan Windler.
We just can't get Dean off the mind. All right,
DW, right? DW. Next up here is the big man group. There's really not a lot to talk about here because it's kind of locked in. I mean, you're
Robin Lopez and Isaiah Mobley.
No. Evan Mobley is your 4, you know, for the foreseeable future. As of right now, the rookie of the year runner-up who got robbed is going to be entrenched there for years unless something unforeseen happens with Jared Allen. And then Jared Allen, you know, the key to this defense, in my opinion, right now, who doesn't get enough respect on that end. Like, in my opinion, Evan Mobley's like switchability definitely overshadows Jared Allen's ability to rim protect and to step out and you know, limit players in the on the perimeter. We talk a lot about Evan Mobley's switchability, but not enough about Jared Allen's like true all around defensive game. And so he really is the guy on the defensive end who leads the way. And so those two guys are locks. There's no real controversy there at all. Your third big off the bench could be interesting this season. It's not really up for debate at this point in time, just because Kevin Love is coming off of a 6th man of the year runner-up season. That's a big deal, and he played the most games in 5 years. So that's huge accomplishment for him when everybody kind of writ him off and wanted him shipped out of town.
Not this guy.
I count myself among that bunch. Like, I was ready to throw Kevin Love to the Wolves, no pun intended. And that completely, his season last season showed just how vital spacing is in that secondary unit. So you definitely need Kevin Love to have another big year, especially when you're losing the amount of spacing the Cavs lost out of the front court. And then you get to your second big off the bench, Robin Lopez, who my question for you is, do you think Robin Lopez will play often, or do you think he's more so like an injury kind of replacement kind of guy?
I think it
Playing the
might be
Ed Davis role.
I think it might be situational. I think he's much more useful than Ed Davis in the sense that he's not basically a coach off the bench. We brought him in to play valuable minutes because
How dare you?
We basically found out last year when Ed Davis stepped on the floor. Like the funniest part about Ed Davis ever playing starting minutes at center was Twitter being like, "Oh wow, Ed Davis can move. That's cool." Like if that's the bar that we set for Ed Davis to like be a plus on the floor. Robin Lopez still has gas in the tank. He has shown that throughout many seasons in a row. I mean, I think it's going to be situational in the sense that if we're looking
like
for
a big body to throw out there against some of the burlier,
I think him and Kevin's minutes are kind of going to feed off of each other depending on what the situation asks for. If we need more of a floor spacer and more of an offensive punch, we're probably going to go towards Kevin. But if we need more of a defensive type center, not that Robin Lopez is necessarily known more for his defense, but the bar of being a better defender than Kevin Love is very low. And I love Kevin Love as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to sit here and be like, man, Kevin Love, top-notch defender at the power forward position. Him and Jetty are pretty close in my eyes in defensive ability, which is not a compliment to Kevin Love in the slightest. But I think with JB, he's going to tend to probably like I said before, he's quick to yank Kevin if he's not performing well. So I think Robin Lopez, I see him probably always playing around like 10 to 15 minutes a game.
Do you think that will happen when the roster is at full strength, though? That's the big question. Like Rubio's returned, and
I think when Rubio returns, it's more going to be the guards' minutes that are going to get tinkered with. I would say Raul Neto and Charis Levert's minutes are going to probably be the most affected in that case, versus Robin Lopez minutes are probably going to be determined by how many, like in like the last quarter of the year. I don't know if the Cavs necessarily, if they're pushing for a playoff position, are going to want to play Mobley and Allen 32 plus minutes a game. And that's where Robin Lopez will truly provide a lot of his value, as well as being that refreshing boost while also maintaining the health of our two players that, let's face it, for the majority of last year were alternating injuries.
Yeah, so I think that's the biggest factor in the Cavs' upcoming season. To me, is health. Obviously, we have to.
That was the big factor last year too.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a team that could have very well finished as a top 3 seed in the East had they not suffered so many injuries. It also could have altered the breakouts of certain players. We already know all about that, and we're not going to jump into it, but we know that these are things that all, impact NBA teams at some level. Health is always going to be something that teams are going to struggle with down the stretch. Rarely does a team stay fully healthy, if at all. So Cleveland's got some questions to answer there. But last but not least are the two-way guys at this point in time, which I believe are RJ Nembhard and Isaiah Mobley. And I'm going to skip over Jamarco Pickett.
What?
Who was recently signed, I believe, to a training camp deal. I'm not going to be incorrect. We're not going to talk about him just yet. We'll save that for the wine and gold scrimmage, time. But Isaiah Mobley and RJ Nembhard, if you had to pick a scenario, or if you had to choose one who you think is going to see the court more often this season, which one?
Isaiah Mobley. I think that I just think that there's too much depth in the position. Like RJ Nembhard doesn't stretch the floor. He's not an aggressive. He's more of a rim attacking type player. He's more of a guard than he necessarily is a forward in terms of his skill set. And as I said prior, I think the Cavs have more than enough options at those guard type positions and ball handlers that I don't see a situation in which RJ Nembhard is going to provide a value more so than Isaiah Mobley, because let's say there's a situation where one of the two bigs gets injured or they need to rest. I think that's more likely that we need to put in Isaiah Mobley to just give him some minutes to be a backup, kind of take that Robin Lopez role while Robin Lopez fills the gap of one of the two starting spots, or Kevin, either or. I just think there's a lot more opportunity for Isaiah than there is for RJ Nembhard. And I could be a little biased because I feel like I'm a lot lower on RJ Nembhard than the majority of Cavs fans seem to be with his terms of his promise, because I feel like now with Luke Travers, I'd rather have Luke Travers than have RJ Nembhard, because they're kind of like the same type of player.
I'd rather have Khalifa Diop than have RJ Barrett. No, don't.
Oh, RJ Barrett. Oh,
not RJ.
Wow, hot take from Mac. Luke Travers greater than RJ Barrett.
Than RJ Nembhard.
Who needs Donovan Mitchell when you got Luke Travers? Says every Knicks fan ever.
Every episode is a blunder. Every episode I slip up somewhere. But yes, I kind of agree with that, just because you have like literally at full strength, literally 5 guards who could be viable options to see game time. RJ Nembhard just does not fit in there anywhere. So it's outside of an injury replacement on the roster. I just don't see it happening in the big leagues. Isaiah Mobley could, feasibly see the game, a couple of games this season in regards to possible injuries or keeping guys fresh, and just to get him some real NBA action. I'm very interested to see the dynamic there between him and his brother. I'd love to see a lineup featuring both. We saw it at USC. We could definitely see it in Cleveland. That's going to do it, guys. I mean, we went down from top to bottom, I believe. There still could be some changes made. We could see another move happen between now and the start of the season. But if this is what the Cavs have to work with, I'm okay with that. I guess my last question for you, my friend, is if no other moves are made, are you feeling confident about the Cavs' chances to contend this season?
When you say contend, are you saying for a
top 4 seed?
I feel like we're fringe right now. I think, especially with, like I said before, I think the continuity is going to be an issue. I think that it's going to take time to gel. So I wouldn't be surprised over our first 20 games if we, like, not looking at the schedule and picking win-loss for each one. I wouldn't be surprised if we're like 12-8 to start the year, like 11-9, something slow like that, just because it takes time to adjust. I mean, this is a huge difference to what the Cavs need to do overall. It's gonna be a lot to see how Darius and Donovan adjust to needing to share the ball so frequently. Like, this isn't a Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell situation or a Colin Sexton, Darius Garland situation. Like, this is completely different. This is two all-star level guards that have both accomplished various accolades in their career that now need to figure out how they're going to gel specifically. And they haven't played with another player that's to the level of what they expect when they step on the floor on opening night.
Amen. I couldn't have put it any better myself. And with that being said, guys, as we always tell you, if you'd like to reach out to us directly, you can on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and more at itscavalier_pod. If you want to be added to the exclusive It's Cavalier Discord chat, you know what to do. Leave a rating, leave a review, send a screenshot of said review or rating to itscavalier53@gmail.com, and we'll send you an invite. With that said, go Cavs.